For today's agenda, we have three speakers. First one is Adam Berecz with his talk From Objects to Interface, Serialized Forms with Vueform. The next one would be Daniel Kelly with Giving Nuxt Content a Voice. And the last one, if we will still have some time, I will quickly explain what we have, what is the overview of key updates, trends, and insights from the developer world for March 2025. So let's keep going. Adam, please, microphone to you.
Hi, everyone. Can I take over and share my screen? Let me try to see if this works. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
And does it look okay? Like everything seems normal? Great. All right, let me just do my setup here. Okay, so hi, everyone. Normally, I would start with a question asking you if you know how much of your life do you think you spend sleeping. But as you probably won't answer me right now, I would just go ahead and straight say that we spend about a third of our lives sleeping. And because of this, most people have a very, very good bed at home. And this makes sense because if you spend as much as a third of your life with something, of course, you want to use the best equipment and tools for it. Now, what else do we spend a third of our lives with? It's work. And for the most of us listening now, it's probably development. But the thing is that in development, it's not always obvious what the best tool is. Let's take forms as an example. A form can be as simple as a single slider that lets you pick how much you want to spend in a hotel per night. But a form can be a quite complicated one with maybe hundreds of fields that you have to fill in to get a personalized insurance offer. If you ever struggled by using the same tool for both scenarios, there's a chance that you're missing out on the benefits that different tools can offer. Imagine that you start working on a new project and you get this design plan. And this design plan has a couple of forms. What's common about them is that they look completely different in different parts of the layout. Now, this isn't because designers hate us developers. It's just that they want to have the best design that caters user experience. I like to call this type of forms UI-first forms. But the thing is that as developers, we like to think in terms of reusability. So it's very likely that we only have maybe just a single drop-down component that we have to fit into different parts of this layout and match the design. So one thing that is very important for us for these type of forms is to be able to do these design customizations very easily. Now, if you're using the UI component library like ShadCN or VueStatic, you are probably already doing it right. Why? Because these UI libraries are designed to be very easily customized design-wise. They are, in fact, always experimenting with new ways how they can make things more and more customizable, easy to customize for you with more freedom, while keeping things reasonably reusable. Because as developers, we usually argue about a lot of things, but there's one thing we all agree on, and that is that we want to have reusability without the limitations or any kind of difficulty in shaping things in our way. But that's unfortunately not how it works. There's always a trade-off because tools are optimized for certain scenarios, which means they won't perform that well in others. So what about the forms where the design customization is not the primary aspect, but we have to gather a lot of data and maybe we have hundreds of fields? I like to call this type of forms data-first forms. And in data-first forms, as I mentioned, we can easily have hundreds of fields. And one thing that is very important for us is, for example, how quickly and easily we can create these large forms. But even beyond creating these many fields and large forms, these forms introduce other common challenges, like how to handle nested data, how to repeat elements, or how to break forms into multiple steps, and so on. If we try to rely only on our UI components for these type of forms, we will likely get annoyed a bit. Because probably we're going to have a ton of markup, and we're going to have to solve the same problems over and over again. But as developers, we don't like repeating ourselves. So the question is there a better way to handle these type of forms? You probably expect this, and I'm here to tell you there is. My name is Adam Berecz, and I created Vueform, an open source form framework that aims to help you with this problem. About 10 years ago, my brother and I were running this small development agency in Budapest, Hungary, and we were facing these challenges over and over again. I mean, it was 10 years ago, so everybody was basically still using jQuery, including us, but there was not even a proper validation library out there. So I created a solution for us to help with the form development, and it kind of worked. And later I talked to other people from development companies, and it turned out that they did the same, except that I really, really enjoyed working on this tool, and I stick to it for the last 10 years. And the result of that today is Vueform. And Vueform has three main goals. The first is to make form development easy and simple, so it increases your productivity. Second is to provide out-of-the-box solutions for common form-related challenges and problems, so you have less maintenance work and your project becomes more scalable. And the third is to provide a common language for developers when it comes to forms, so it enhances collaboration by making it easier to work on someone else's code. And yeah, let me show you how it works. After you install Vueform in your project, you're going to have a couple of global components registered. And one of them is Vueform that will serve as the wrapper for our future forms. Now, Vueform comes with a lot of form elements. Simple ones like drop-down, sliders, date pickers, but it has a few more advanced ones like matrices, spreadsheets, signature, etc. What's common about them is that all of them are available in the open source library, and they are free to use for everyone. And this is how you can use them in your forms. This form is going to have a text editor for the name, a text input for the name, a rich text editor for the bio, and a slider for the height. But of course, this is too generic, and you want to add properties to it to customize it. You can add, for example, a label, or define how many columns it should take up in a row, or you can add validation rules. Well, you can also do a bit more advanced stuff, like adding conditions to it. In this case, the password element is only going to be part of the form if the user indicated that they want to create an account by checking that checkbox. Or you could use conditions in Vueform for other things, like making an element conditionally required, or read-only, or disabled, and so on. Now here's another example. Let's say that you start working on a blog engine, and you have to allow your users to create articles in multiple languages at the same time. In Vueform, you can prefix certain elements with a T, indicating that they should be translatable, and you can add the multilingual tag to the Vueform component. And the result of that is this: a form that has a language selector, and users can switch between them and fill in the field values in all of them. Now, when the form gets submitted, each field is going to have an object value where each language will have its own different content. Well, the next example is about select. And select is the most versatile component of Vueform. In fact, I have a separate library for it. It's called Vueform Multiselect, which, by the way, has just recently passed 8 million downloads on NPM. So even though that select has a lot of features out of the box, when used in Vueform as a framework, it can be enhanced a bit further. This is one way how you can define options for select in Vueform. And this is an array, right? A list of users. But we usually don't store our users on the front end. What we likely want to do is load them from an API. So you can also pass an endpoint to the select for the items, so it will load its options from there dynamically. But we can take this one step further. Let's say we have a country selector. It usually comes with a state selector. But we know that states are not for all the countries. So now, just to keep things simple, let's say that they are only for US and Australia. Now, the state endpoint has to know what country is selected in order to know what states it should load, right? What we can do is assign a dynamic query param to the states endpoint that points to the country element in our form, which means that the state list is going to be empty by default, and it will only going to populate its options if the country is selected or changed, and it will replace this dynamic query param with the country value. To keep things more interesting, let's add a third select here that is a city selector that depends on the country and the state. And the result of that is this form. You can see that the city list is empty by default if you select Netherlands, if you load its cities, and if you select United States, it's going to have a state selector as well, and if you load its cities, depending on that. One last example here. Imagine you have two input fields. Actually, the first is the input, and the second is an output that should show some kind of a calculated value of the first input. Now, one way to approach this problem in Vueform is by subscribing to the change event of the first input. And by this, we will have access to the element, which is basically the Vue component of the text element itself, which gives us access to all of its properties and methods. Now, one property that each Vueform element has is form. And form is the wrapping Vueform component, which has an L method that gives us access to all the other elements in our form. And currently, we need our output element, and we can use its update method to update its value with our current value times 2. Each time our input value changes, right? Another way to approach this problem in Vueform is by using a static element as the output, because static element in Vueform can be used for many things, like displaying a string, HTML, or other components. Now, what's cool about it is that it also has access to this element, and you can use it the same way to reach any other elements in our form, and in this case, display the input field's value times 2 as the value for our static element. Now, this is just a simple and silly example, but imagine the flexibility you can have if you can access any form element in your form this way and basically do anything with them. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there are experienced developers now thinking that, okay, this is nice, but what happens in edge cases? Will Vueform ever stand in my way and I have to do crazy workarounds just to get some stuff done? Well, one of my main goals was when creating Vueform, trying to make sure that this never happens. Vueform is designed in a way that you can customize, extend, or even replace any part of it using a progressive approach. But what does it mean? First of all, Vueform has CSS variables. It comes with almost 400 CSS variables that lets you customize colors, font sizes, spacing, even background colors in different states like hover and focus. But not everything has a CSS variable. Sometimes you want to change the actual classes of your components. You can add, remove, override, or replace any class of any element or component in Vueform using this simple syntax. But sometimes you also want to change the DOM structure of your components. And for this, you can use alternative templates. In Vueform, each component has separated business logic and templating, which means that you can assign multiple templates to the same component without affecting its business logic. Let me show you how it works. So this is the file element in Vueform, and this is how the uploaded file looks by default. Now, if we set view image, the file element is going to pick a different template to display the file preview, and now it will have an image as well. We can use this to create as many templates as we want for an element or a component. Maybe we want a PDF preview or video preview for a file uploader, but we can actually replace the default components and default templates of our components. But the thing is that sometimes you also want to extend the business logic. And for this, you can use plugins in Vueform. This is a very simple example of a Vueform plugin that gets applied to all the elements in Vueform, as you can see by using the regex. But it could be applied only to a single element or just 2 elements, or actually any other component in Vueform, not just elements. Now, what this particular plugin does is that it adds a unique ID for all the elements, which means that you can access this unique ID in the elements templates. Or you can write a second plugin, maybe for the Vueform component, that replaces the data that gets submitted by the form at the end of filling in the form, to use these unique IDs as keys for the elements instead of their names. And of course, you can add custom elements to Vueform, because your design system probably has your custom components and custom elements, or maybe you want to use third-party elements like a tiny MC editor. You can add them just like regular elements in Vueform, but I'm not going to get too much detail into this right now because it's quite a long topic. But if you're interested, feel free to check out the website. There's quite an extended documentation about it. But now let's go back to the topic of form creation a bit. I already showed you that this is one way how you can create forms in Vueform, but there's another way. And that's by defining an object of elements and passing them as a schema property of Vueform. But if you can do this, we can also do this. We can use a single object to define all the properties of Vueform component and use vbind to add all of them to the Vueform component. In this example, I used almost everything that I showed you before: translatable elements, async options, conditions, and so on. So the point of Vueform providing these features out of the box is not only to save you time, but also this: to be able to add advanced features to forms using only a simple object, so you are still able to serialize it. Serialization is the process of converting data into a transferable state that can be reconstructed later. In other words, we can convert complex forms with advanced logic into a simple JSON and store them in our database. This also allows us to create forms dynamically using almost human terms, like I need a text input if X is selected, or I want to load options from my server, or I need a form with 3 steps, and so on. Because data-first forms can be very often defined like this. It's not like you need a custom-looking email or birthday input in an insurance application form too often, right? Our focus is on gathering data, and we might not even get separate design for these type of forms. If people who aren't actual developers, our client, our boss, our PM, or PO, are defining these requirements, we are basically just the hand that assemble these forms, and it's boring. If you are using Vueform, you are probably already at the more productive side of things. But wouldn't it be great if you were only needed for maybe 10% of the things that actually need your valuable development skills? And maybe instead of receiving written requirements from your PM, you would get a 90% ready form without too much effort on their end. Vueform comes with a free-to-use drag-and-drop form builder, and this is just one case it can help you with. People without any coding knowledge can make use of basically 90% of Vueform features without having to learn anything about Vueform first. It can be used to support the work of your development team, to allow anyone in your organization to create forms in any workflow, or to let the actual users of your application to create forms dynamically. And I think it's the best if I show you it in action. Now, this is the builder. And one important thing that you need to know about it is that everything you see here comes from the open source library, only that it has a visual interface to it. But the result, if anybody build form with it, the result of that will be the same as if it was created by a developer. Now, in this short demo, I'm going to go ahead and create a very simple registration form with form steps. And I will first assemble it, and then I will show you how it looks like in an actual project. And then I will fill in the data as well. Now, let's start by using the AI assistant tool. And I already prepared the prompt, which is in this. OK, the prompt is actually here. OK, so this says, create a form with the following fields: first name, last name, email, and password. Now let's generate this form. OK, this looks nice. But we don't need this title now. We don't need this submit button. And I want to have the last name next to the first name. I'm going to create a registration form with 4 steps. And for this, I will use the steps component. So let's add 2 more steps. And the first step is going to be account details. The second is profile. The second is to-dos. And the fourth is schedule. Okay. So we already fine with account details. And for the profile, we need a rich text editor, text input, and the gallery. Now, I'm going to rename the editor to bio. This is where the user will be able to tell about themselves a bit. This will be a list of hobbies. Now for this, I don't want the user to have any options by default for this dropdown, so I'm going to remove it. And instead, I will allow the user to create new options on the fly. And the gallery here seems fine. Now for the to-do, what I want to have is a list of to-dos that the users can add dynamically. And for this, I will use the nested list element. And everything that I put inside this nested list element can be repeated by the user. So first, I need a text input that I will call to-do. And this will be the to-do. But I don't need a label. I need a placeholder. Now, what else I need? I need a tabs, radio tabs input. That will be the ready state. Okay, I don't need the label here, but I need 2 options. For the 0, I need no. For the 1, I need yes. And by default, this should be no. Now let's resize this a bit. And let's make the to-do disabled, but only if the ready state is equal to yes. So the user should be no longer able to edit this to-do if the ready is yes. Now let's add some headers so that the user know what they're filling in. To-do, the other side, it's the ready. Okay, this looks good. And now for the schedule, I'm going to create a very small timetable using the grid element. And this grid element has a grid designer where you can add columns, rows, merge cells, and do everything that you can do with CSS grid basically. And now I need 4 columns and only 2 rows. I could resize the columns if I wanted to, but I could just like stick to writing it available, morning, afternoon, evening. Now what I want for this grid element is to have 3 dropdowns here saying yes or no. And for this, I will use a select input. And I will change it in a way that it will be called yes, no. It doesn't need a label, but it needs 2 options. For 0, it should say no. For 1, it should say yes. All right. Now, I want to have 3 copies here. What I will do is create a new element type within the builder from this select by saving it as a new element. And I will call this yes, no. Yes, no element. Save it. And you can see that the new category appears here that says custom. And now I can reuse this element. And I will move it here. One extra step here is to make our grid look a bit nicer. Let's arrange everything to the center and make the labels bold. Good. Now, one last step here is, do you remember that I told you about using alternative templates and views for components? Well, we can switch to a different view for the grid element using a table that looks like an actual spreadsheet instead. And we can also set column and row headers to make it look nicer. So one last thing we should do here is that probably your project is not using this green. So what we will do is go to the theme panel and change this primary color to maybe a purple. And I also told you about the almost 400 CSS variables that Vueform has. Now all of them has an input here. And maybe say that your inputs don't have these lightly rounded borders, but maybe fully rounded borders. So we can go to the input section, go to the radius, and change this to 20. So now it will be fully rounded. or go to the hover state and change the background color to light gray. Okay. Now we could go ahead and fill in this form, test out how the data looks like on the right side. Now, just to save some time, I will go ahead and straight export it. I go to the export panel and I can switch between single file component, inline, and schema object exports. I will stick to the schema object and I will make sure that the theme variables are included globally. Now I will copy this code and I already have this project that I prepared for you that says registration form. Now let's look for this file. And this is the registration form. And I will copy my form here. And you can see that it's here. It's working. It hovers with gray. And we can have validation, like validation. We can have a list of hobbies. We can upload files. Yeah. Here, we can create a list of to-dos. We can disable them so they're no longer editable. And we can fill in yes or no in our schedule table. Now, this is just some of the features that the builder has. I could probably go around a lot more, but most importantly, it has the dark mode. And you can edit forms in dark mode as well. You can also switch between languages for the builder. It can be localized on many different levels. And if you're missing a language from here, just feel free to reach out to me and I will be happy to create it for you with an AI. And yes, one important thing here is that I already showed you that this is one way how you can export the forms. But this can only be used in your actual Vue files, right? This isn't something that you can import back. If you want to do that, you can also open this export import window where you will have an object or JSON representation of the Vueform. And I could just, like copy this, clear the Vueform, refresh the page, and insert it back. And you can continue editing from there. Now, this is about the demo. If you want to play with it, feel free to check out builder.vueform.com. As I mentioned before, it's free for everyone to use online. But the Vueform builder has an integrable version as well. And if you want to integrate it in your application or project, users of any kind will create forms with it. And you can export this JSON that I just showed you before programmatically and store them in your database that you can use to load it back later, to restore the state and continue editing, or you can use it to render the forms anywhere in your application. Now, the users of those forms will submit data, and you can store the data in your database as well. In this way, Vueform Builder can be integrated in any workflow while giving you full control over your data without having to rely on any kind of third-party service. And it comes with a lot of customization options. You can change its layout, for example, turn on off features, or you can reorganize panels or hide them if you don't need them. Or you can add your custom list of elements or add your actually custom elements to the Vueform Builder. Same goes for categories, or you can change the configuration options on the right panel. And of course, you can tweak the branding of the builder to match your project's design. Now, this integrable version of the builder is a paid product, and this is how the Vueform project sustains itself. So if anybody is using a licensed version for it, they're also supporting the open source part of Vueform. Now, this is about it. I see a long road ahead of me with Vueform because I see many ways it can be improved and used to solve more and more exciting challenges. I'm always happy to listen to feedback and ideas. In fact, I set up Vueform's GitHub in a way that everybody can throw in new ideas or upload others. And I, in fact, take these into account when planning new features, because I think it's the best if I work on a tool that is useful for the most people. So if you have any feedback or just want to check it out or anything, I will drop the link also in the chat here. Feel free to check it out on GitHub. If you'd like to support my work, there's something even more helpful that you can do than sponsoring me on GitHub. If you know anyone who could actually gain value by integrating the builder in their project or workflow, the best thing you can do for me is just let them know about it. Working on Vueform has been the most rewarding professional experience of my whole life. And yeah, I'm very happy that I could share it with you today. Thank you very much for listening. And yeah, let's chat if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. The amount of work and amount of love you've put into this project is just something incredible based on the amount of features you have. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of work and a lot of love. So both points stands. Yeah.
You can just imagine. We have a question from the chat. First of all, thank you. How much time did the development take you? And was all of this done by you alone, or you was working with some other folks?
Yeah. I will start with the easier question. Yes, I did it all alone. From time to time, I had some help, writing tests or something like this, maybe for the builder, for example, and some minor fixes. And I received some contributions from the community in the form of, localization files, for example. But yeah, I can say that probably 99% of the work was done by me. And yeah, the reason for this is partially because I really enjoy working on this tool. And I hope that this will change in the future. I hope that, if people meet Vueform and they start using it and they may, want to do anything with it, they will also be happy to join the project. So yeah, I can see a few other questions how we should go. Should I answer the second part of the first one first, or just move ahead? Yeah, actually, quickly, like how much time did it take? I can't really tell because there were many rewrites, there were previous versions. I started, writing the first code about 6 years ago, but this is like probably like the 6th or 7th version, including all the rewrites I had. But this particular version is out there probably like 2 or 3 years. So yes, and probably it took me between half and 6 to 12 months to write Vueform, and then probably the same amount of time for the builder as well. And half a year probably writing those 7,000 unit tests for Vueform itself to make sure that it's rock solid and stable. Yeah. So would it be easy to use some other UI kit components, for example, Vuetify? Yeah, that's a question I get a lot. And this is a very good question because there are different answers to this. First of all, yes, it's possible. Because if you're using Vuetify or UStatic, then you are free to use any component library with it. So what you can do is use, for example, Vuetify for everything else than forms, and just use Vueform for the form components. Now that I mentioned that there are CSS variables, they let you customize Vueform in a way that it can match almost any design system. So in fact, it has I can actually show you if you want me. My screen is still sharing. We have a theme that goes material theme. And you see that this looks very much like the Vuetify theme. So this is one way of using it with Vuetify or any other component library. The second way would be writing a wrapper for Vuetify components in Vueform. And this way you could also use the actual Vuetify components for the text, select, and so on. And maybe you would just like pass down the properties to that. So what is the validation mechanism used behind the scenes? Any ZOT here? No, there's no ZOT here. Vueform has actually its own validation logic and library that covers most of the things that is required in like async validation, conditional validation, dependent, and so on. So yeah, there's no ZOT, but with plugins, you can override actually the validation layer of Vueform. So if using ZOT is something like a priority for you, you can certainly achieve that, or even write a plugin for the community so that everybody else can do the same.
When we come to the validation, it's always useful if you have an ability to manually validate the forms. I'm pretty sure you have something like that already in Vueforms, right?
Yes. Manually, if you mean by manually, yeah, basically what you can do is access the Vueform component as a reference and use its validate method to validate the data, just like call it as a method on the Vueform component itself. So on this, you just put a ref here, and here maybe on the unmounted hook, you can just validate it.
Is there any ability to validate separate fields or just the full form?
Yes, yes. So in Vueform, at some point I showed you in the presentation. Let me just try to go back there very quickly. Yes, this is how you have access to this element, and this is basically the Vueform component instance itself. And by this, you have access to all of Vueform's components, methods, and properties. And one method is this $, method that can give you access to any element in your form. If it's a nested element, then you can use the dot syntax to reach them. And you can call its validate method separately as well.
Cool. Is there any way to let's say make a high top level of customization of the components from Vueforms? I mean, to define one single config and all the inputs, all the selects will have the same styling based on that, or do we need to create the wrappers for every single component if we want to change the style?
Yeah. So the Vueforms design system is created in a way that if you use these CSS variables, you basically automatically, like customizing all the components in Vueform. So this is why we have, for example, the border radius, just like a general thing, and this gets applied to, like probably there are 2 different border radiuses or 3, like the normal, the large, and the small. One gets applied to text areas and editors. The normal one gets applied to like select and inputs, and the small one is probably for checkboxes. So if this is the question, if this answers your question, that yeah.
Well, yeah, partially yes, if we're talking only about the styles, but if we wanna, let's say, change the functionality of some of the fields, of some of the inputs or selects or other components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you mean the functionality, yeah, in general, what you can do is change its template and business logic separately. For the business logic, you need plugins. For the template, you need template overrides or alternative templates. And if you combine those two, maybe let's say that you want to add an extra div that displays a property or some kind of a computed value of an input, then what you should do is create a plugin that adds that property, like a computed property, to that certain element. And then you create a separate template for that element that has, that extra div under the element maybe. And this is why I mentioned that using UI component libraries are sometimes easier than using, for example, Vueform, because Vueform is not designed to be, used for a lot of different looking forms and form elements. I mean, of course you can, but it's a bit less easy to make those design customization and this type of customization. And while on the other side, if you're using something like Chetzian or probably your framework, it's much easier to tailor components this way. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the answer.
Yes.
I think we have one more in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible to set a backend that directly manages the form, including dynamic generation and updates without needing to manually adjust the front-end code? Yes, I think definitely. As you can, I showed you, yeah, probably there are animations here, not many. Yeah, so as you can define a form using this object or like this object, you can basically just use vbind to assign this object and all of its properties to Vueform. Yes, you can use a backend to generate this object because this is a JSON format. And yes, you can pass it to Vueform. So actually, I had one of the predecessors of Vueform was called Laraform, and it was doing something similar with a specific support to Laravel. Okay. Okay. Somebody doesn't like it. All right.
I hope it was just a misclick.
Yeah, maybe somebody doesn't like Laravel here. Yeah, all right. Thank you very much for everything. Listening, questions, yeah, all the stuff.
Yeah, thanks again, Adam. That was really good. Really good tool that everyone can use in their project. I'm also already excited to try it in my pet project.
Yeah,
because I have a lot of forms in that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks again. So let's move on. Our next speaker is Daniel Kelly, and he's a lead instructor in Vue School, where he teaches Vue.js to both beginners and experienced developers. Most of the days he's either working on the content for a new course, preparing to teach a live workshop, writing articles for the Vue School blog, or helping to plan the next big Vue School event. So, Daniel, I'm passing the ball to you. Thanks for joining.
All right, thank you so very much. Let me see if I can get my screen up here. I'm very excited to be here, and just honored that I would get the invite. So I don't have anything like super prepared today, but I did happen to be working on a blog post at the end of last week where I was experimenting using 11 Labs, which is an AI text-to-speech generation service, in order to bring a voice to a Vue.js application. By the way, can you hear me, everybody? Just want to make sure that I am. Okay, cool. Always have to ask. So ultimately, what I ended up with was a little Nuxt layer that was able to take Nuxt content, content that was written in a markdown format in your typical Nuxt content fashion, and provide a component that shoots that content over to 11 Labs and then creates speech out of it. So this is a little demo of that in action. I don't know if you could hear, let's see, can I share my computer audio?
Yeah, if you're sharing the screen, there is a toggle that you can turn on to share your audio as well.
Aha, okay. So if I come here, let me stop presenting real quickly, and then if I share entire screen, aha, to share audio, share tab instead. Okay, so I'm going to Chrome tab, window. Here we go. Is this going to work? Okay, I'm not sure. I'm logged into a different Chrome user in this. Actually, you know what I could do? Let me do this. This is just to increase the drama, y'all. It makes it much more intense that way, right? Okay, sharing one more time. Let's go back to sharing tab. And aha, here it is. Okay. So, and yes, we are sharing the audio now. So yeah, this is what it looks like. This is a blog post. It's written with Nuxt Content. So this lives in the content directory. And yeah,
Nuxt Content text-to-speech with 11 Labs. We're excited to announce the release of Nuxt Content Narrator,
cool.
a powerful new layer for Nuxt Content.
So how did I make this? Well, let's take a look real quickly first at 11 Labs. Let me share my screen again and share my other window. Screen 2. Okay. So 11 Labs, when you log into 11 Labs, they have a ton of different voices available. And I just was able to pass in an ID for a particular voice. So like if I liked this voice right here, which of course you're not gonna be able to hear because I'm in the wrong tab now. But yeah, I can just copy a voice ID, pick a voice that I like, and then inside of my my project, I can open up the page that I'm using this on, and then pass in a voice ID. Whoops, voice ID to the component. Okay, so how do these components work? Well, essentially there are 3 different components available. There's the NC narrator service, so that stands for, of course, Nuxt Content Narrator Service. And all you do is you wrap the other components inside of the project with this NC narrator service. And then everything that can go inside of here, number one is the player. So this NC narrator player is this player right here. So with that one component, you get the progress, you get the play button, you get the the seconds over here, and then you also have these NC narrator dev tools. Okay, so what this does, I had it commented out. Basically, these only display on local, but since you're oftentimes writing your Nuxt content directly inside of your project, right? At least us developers are, and we're working on a local instance. These NC narrator dev tools just provide a little button that only displays when you've got import.meta.dev set to true. So essentially only in dev mode. And this is what actually sends the content of your post to 11 Labs and makes the audio for you. So that's available on local to send it off. And all that's really doing under the hood is inside of, let's see, voice Nuxt content. So let me go to this project here. So this is the actual source code for the layer. The layer provides a API endpoint for generating these voices. And under the hood, it uses the 11 Labs JavaScript API or JavaScript SDK. And it just sends off the content of your post to the 11 Labs. Where is it? Here it is. It just sends it off to the 11 Labs API in order to translate it for you or to create audio for you. And then ultimately what it winds up doing is storing that audio inside of your project. Now we're using use storage in order to store this. So you could really store the audio anywhere you wanted, depending on where you, depending on how you configure use storage. But out of the box, what it's doing is it's storing all that audio just directly inside of the file system. So just like you're managing your actual post content inside of your file system with, with a content directory, you can manage the audio in your file system as well. Just commit it to Git. Now this, this is larger files because we're talking about audio. So you do have the option of, changing up your use storage configuration and then saving it to some actual kind of storage bucket or something. But I haven't got that piece totally figured out yet, but it should totally be possible since we are using use storage. Okay, and so the last component that we have is a NC narrator follow along renderer. What this does is power this follow along kind of, when I play it, it follows along, highlights the words as it's playing. This doesn't take any special content to create this. All this does, so if you see right here on the NC narrator service, we pass in the data from Nuxt content. So right up here, this is just a normal query for query collection. And this is built into Nuxt content, right? There's nothing special about this. And the data that comes out of that, we've renamed story, and then we're just passing it in to that narrator service. So the service is really responsible for ingesting your content, sending it off to 11 Labs in order to get, translated or get the audio generated for it. And then it's also responsible for passing that story, that content on to the narrator follow along renderer in order to render this right here. Okay, so there were a couple of different challenges I came across when creating this. Number one was just getting the highlighting working in the renderer. What I had to do to make that work was inside of inside of my components directory. And by the way, y'all, I used Cursor and AI a ton when helping to develop this. Like, I didn't do a lot of this by hand. Cursor helped me along the way and did so very well. In fact, this follow along render, I probably wouldn't have been able to do by myself in the time that I did this. So essentially inside of this render, we take the story, which is this big, like, let's take a look at the, so inside of here, we have a path. Okay, so this is the story as Nuxt Content provides it, or this is the content. It has a value option on it, which is an array. And basically all the items in the array are just different like block level elements within your context here, right? So the first one is an H1. It has some content. The object is, the different attributes that are on that H1. So essentially we're talking about vnodes virtual DOM. And it does the same thing on and on. So what I had to do essentially when creating the highlighting effect was split up, kind of recursively iterate over all of these arrays and split up all of the text into further arrays that were all spans, right? And so that way, as we're moving through, we can highlight each word individually. And 11 Labs actually comes back with, if you take a look at the audio here, so audio stories, it's crazy. So the audio is base 64 encoded here, but it also comes back. Like I said, this is a lot to store to GitHub. So, if you want to store somewhere else, that's probably a good idea. But it also comes back. Where is it? Yeah, it comes back with all this timing information. So this is exact times of when the different characters actually occur within the video. So 11 Labs was able to generate all that for me. I just had to work with Cursor and sync up the audio with the highlighting on the page. So another challenge I had while developing this was taking written content and translating that into spoken content. Not technically speaking, like 11 Labs handled all that for me, but what do I do with headings? What differentiates a heading in written content from a heading in spoken content? And basically it boiled down to what kind of pauses am I adding in there for emphasis? There might be more things we can do to control this when sending that to 11 Labs, but right now I'm really utilizing pauses in order to kind of differentiate between different types of formatting on the page. So what that looked like, let's see, Nuxt voice content. So this is my example project. Here's the actual source code. So inside of a utils directory, inside of the server, I basically created this NC narrator markdown to speech function. This took the markdown from the content file and optimizes it for before we send it off to 11 Labs. And so what we've done here is used regex to basically find different types of headings, so on and so forth. We could probably make this better and remove the regex piece and actually use the markdown parser to make this more efficient. But this was able to work fairly quickly. And you can see here, right here, when I'm handling headings, I add a break, a long pause after the heading, so it kind of just provides a little bit more emphasis. Same thing here on like list. After each list item, we're providing a medium pause, and so on and so forth. So this has a lot of room for improvement, but it was interesting to do. And yeah, I think that's about it, y'all. Was a fun little project, a blog post that turned into a small little library that was a lot of fun to create. That's it.
Cool, nice. I wonder if it was spoken by 11 Labs, and you just open your mouth, without any sound, or you're speaking it by yourself.
Yeah, good call. I could have totally faked it.
Well, yeah, that was a great topic. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. does anyone have any questions? Happy to answer. And if not, that is cool too.
We have just one request from Maxim from the chat. He asking for the link.
Yes, of course. So it is essentially just a GitHub repo right now. There's no docs or anything. Let me find that. Your repositories. All right, let's see, where's the chat? Here it is. So I am pasting this here in the chat. Aha, I do see the questions over there now. Yeah, great. So Ryan does ask, is it free? Yeah, it's free. It was literally a blog post, and then it turned into, a few more hours of something crazy. So, but yeah, it's totally free. Probably need to add a license in there. So.
There is one more question in the chat. A next module for 11 lab incoming for this cool project?
No, I'm not spending any more time putting any more time into it. Just a fun thing to do. If people do wind up using it, enjoying it, I might maintain it a little bit, but mostly it's just kind of a fun thing. If you want to fork it, be my guest. Yeah, it's totally cool.
Okay, question from Adam. Could we use your voice to read it out?
That's an excellent question. There is functionality on 11 Labs to clone your voice. I haven't tried it yet, but essentially you can create a custom voice in 11 Labs, and then you could use that voice's ID, or at least I assume it would work that way. But yeah, you can totally create custom voices on 11 Labs.
That's great. Another one from Maxim. Do you have some limitations for the content that can be used with this approach?
So I did one post. So let me share. I'll share it in just a minute. But there's a couple YouTube videos I did to kind of demo what it can handle. It was able to do headings. It was able to do lists. The lists sound sometimes the lists sound a little weird. It basically skips over code blocks altogether. It doesn't try to read them out, but the follow along just kind of skips over it as well and keeps going with the text afterwards. So I tested it fairly heavily with all your normal markdown kinds of formatting, and most of it works pretty well within the limitations that I just mentioned. Now I will say, like, I bought the $5 plan. I don't remember how many credits or whatever that gave me, but I ran through the $5 plan really quickly, creating a voice for a longer blog post. So let me just share my screen one more time. Where is stories? No. So this the Digital Alchemist, this was a fun little article that AI created for me, but you can see in here we've got lists, we've got headings, we've got bold, we've got code blocks, we've got quotes, and different kinds of formatting. I tested it, and it works on this, but it is a decent sized article. It's not huge, but this ate up this ate up probably like a tenth of my credits just in one go. So it's not necessarily a cheap thing to do, and maybe there's some ways to optimize it there. I don't know.
We have one more from Maxim. How do you feel about the Nuxt Content? Do you guys use it to write lessons?
I've not used it in production. We don't use it to write lessons. Our main Vue School platform uses Laravel under the hood, so we manage a lot of the content there. I think some of our newer platforms do use Nuxt Content, but I write a lot of my blog posts and stuff in Notion, and that gets sent off to someone else on the team, and they upload it in the proper place because we are managing it in several different platforms. But yeah.
Okay, cool, great. Do we have some more questions?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Is that all the questions?
Yeah, I don't think we have any more.
Awesome.
At the moment. So then thanks again, Daniel. That was a really good job, really good speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Y'all take care.
Okay, guys, I think we're closing. We are really close to the end of these meetups, and there is only me left to finish it. And I will not spend a lot of your time. It's become traditional, but I will show you something that I found interesting in the March. So just a quick overview of key updates, trends, and insights from the developer world for March 2025. In today's agenda, I have 3 topics. The first one is a 10x faster TypeScript. Next one would be Nuxt UI v3 release. And the last one, Doom inside TypeScript type system. So the first one, the new chapter in TypeScript. I want to explain what the native port means for TypeScript and why do we need it. So instead of relying solely on managed runtimes, core elements are now being reimagined as native applications. This change is not just about the speed, it's about fully redefining how developers interact with their language to create smoother and responsive experience. Notice how the move to native code eliminates layers of abstraction typical in managed environments. The new architecture not only speeds up the compilation process, but also optimizes resource usages, ultimately making TypeScript more scalable for larger projects and more aligned with the demands of modern applications. With the community involved and ongoing optimizations, the native port is expected to shape how we build the applications and push the boundaries of what TypeScript can achieve. This is an exciting time for developers, and I'm eager to see how those innovations transform our workflows. The next one, Nuxt UI v3 was recently got a release recently. It's a fresh, modern component library tailored to the Nuxt 3. It somehow rethinks the way we build user interfaces in Nuxt by offering a robust set of components using Reka UI under the hood, as far as I'm aware. Really optimized performance and improved accessibility. The integration with Nuxt module ecosystem makes the perfect fit for modern web applications. And because we have Reka UI, we have those couple of benefits like proper keyboard navigation, area labels, highly accessible components, focus management that just works, and screen reader friendly components out of the box. Another worth to mentioning that there is a good integration with Tailwind CSS v4, which brings also huge performance improvements. I just put this QR code and you can read the article in more details just by following the link from the code. The next one is a Doom inside TypeScript type system, and there is no jokes. After a grueling year and a half of development, the guy just created what is likely the largest TypeScript code base ever built. The project required processing a staggering 177 terabytes of TypeScript types over a 12-day period just to render the first frame of the game. To make the project possible, this guy just had a temporary modifying the TypeScript compiler during development to remove several safeguards, like the limit of excessive stack depth, when comparing types, the limit for deep type instantiations, the maximum size of unions and tuples set to infinity, the truncation limit, and TypeScript's infamous recursion limit. With those protections removed, the type checker could consume up to 100 gigabytes of memory, but it also means that every minor errors could cause catastrophic crashes. So at its core, the project is a WebAssembly runtime implemented purely in TypeScript types. The basic idea was that you can turn C code or just straight WebAssembly into TypeScript type, as in with no JavaScript runtime code at all. That will compile the instructions and return the result. The system implemented all 116 WebAssembly instructions needed to run a DOM with the logic alone, adding by up to 18 million instructions that the type checker had to evaluate one by one, while a typical TypeScript application might have 200,000 to 500,000 instantiations. This project sustained 20 million instantiations per second for 12 consecutive days. So that's really cool. We have enthusiasts like that to work on this crazy stuff. So actually, that's all for you guys today from me. Thanks for listening, and we'll try to keep the news for you for our future meetups. Okay, I think it's time to end. I will remind you guys that you're still able to be a participant on our meetups. You can just fill the form that Anastasia will share to the chat. So fill the form and you will have a chance to be a participant for our meetups. I want to say again, big thanks and big kudos for our participants today. Thanks for Daniel, and thanks for Adam for their beautiful topics. See you guys on the next meetup in a month. Bye bye.